A single act of kindness cost a man his freedom, trapped him inside a ring of 400 Apache warriors, and forced him to prove his soul was worth more than his skin. The desert sun beat down on Elias Kane's cabin as painted faces surrounded him, bows drawn. Arrows aimed at his heart, all because he had stopped to help a woman fix a broken wagon wheel. Elias Kane was a man the frontier had carved from necessity rather than choice. He worked his trap line alone in the Arizona Territory, his cabin 15 miles from the nearest trading post. Inside, his possessions numbered few: a bedroll, traps, and a rifle he cleaned every evening. His hands were calloused and scarred, the fingers of a man who understood how things broke and how they could be mended. The desert understood his language of solitude, asking nothing except respect for its power. On an afternoon when the heat pressed down like a physical weight, Elias rounded a sandstone outcropping and found her. An Apache woman knelt beside a wagon tilted at a sickening angle, its wheel hub split clean through. Her dark hair fell forward as she examined the damage with complete focus. Her clothing was practical, but the careful beadwork marked status and skill. She did not look up when his horse's hooves crunched on gravel. Instead, she remained utterly still, calculating solutions rather than succumbing to despair. Every learned instinct screamed at Elias to ride past. The Arizona Territory in the 1870s was a geography written in blood. The wars between settlers and the end-day people had created a landscape where mercy was often repaid with violence. The smart move was to keep riding, mind his own business, survive another day. Yet something in the woman's stillness held him. She was not performing helplessness. She was confronting a problem with focused determination. Perhaps it was recognition of a kindred spirit. Perhaps it was something older and less rational, a whisper of conscience he thought he had buried. Whatever the reason, Elias dismounted. He spoke no greeting. The woman offered no thanks. Elias examined the hub with focused attention. The damage was significant but not irreparable. He fashioned a splint from ironwood and rawhide, his hands working with practiced efficiency. The woman watched in silence, occasionally handing him tools without being asked. 20 minutes. That was all it took. When he finished, Elias stood, wiped his hands, and met the woman's eyes for the first time. They were dark and unreadable. She nodded once. Elias returned to his horse and rode away without looking back. But the desert remembers everything. As Elias rode toward his cabin through lengthening shadows, he had no way of knowing that the simple act of fixing a broken wheel had set into motion events that would test every assumption he had ever made. The woman he had helped was not simply traveling through Apache land. She was its royalty. And he had just placed his hands on property that belonged to a chieftain, whose laws were older than any treaty, and whose judgment was absolute. The sound came before dawn, a deep rhythmic thunder that pulled Elias from sleep. Hooves, hundreds of them, moving in synchronized formation. When he peered through the narrow gap in his shutters, the reality that greeted him was far worse than any scenario his imagination had constructed. Warriors, Chiricahua Apache warriors, an impossible number of them, forming concentric rings around his cabin. The early morning light caught on their war paint, stark geometry of red and black. Every warrior held a bow with an arrow nocked, obsidian points oriented toward his door. Elias stopped counting because the numbers ceased to matter. He was surrounded by a force so overwhelming that resistance was not brave, but merely stupid. Then the formation parted, and through that gap rode two figures. The woman from yesterday sat atop a magnificent painted pony, wearing a vest rich with beadwork and turquoise jewelry that spoke of wealth and status. Beside her rode a massive, scarred man whose presence seemed to command the landscape itself. Father and daughter, chieftain and princess. A voice cut through the morning air. "Man in the adobe cabin, come out, bring no weapon." It was the woman speaking, her tone carrying the weight of command. Elias opened the door and stepped into the pale dawn light, his hands raised and empty. 400 pairs of eyes watched him with focused intensity. The woman dismounted with fluid grace. "I am Nijoni," she said, her voice steady and formal. "Daughter of Taza, chieftain of the Chiricahua. Yesterday you placed your hands on property that belongs to my father's family. You made decisions about what was ours without permission, without understanding, without right. This is a violation. The repair itself is not the crime. The crime is the assumption that you had the authority to touch what was not yours. Elias's mind raced. He had been trying to help. Intent meant nothing when weighed against action. There is a path forward, Nizhoni continued. A trial of worth. We call it the proving. 3 tests that will measure your body, your mind, and your heart. If you pass, the violation is answered. If you fail, justice will be executed here. Refusal to accept the trial is the same as failure. The choice was no choice at all. I accept the trial, Elias said. Taza spoke for the first time. Good. A man who runs from judgment is already hollow. You will come with us to the hidden valley. You will be tested where our ancestors watch. As the massive formation began to move, Nizhoni rode beside him. This trial is not only yours, she said quietly. I am being tested as well. My father believes I lack wisdom to judge danger in outsiders. Your failure will be his proof. It will cost me my voice in the council. So when you face these tests, know that you are fighting for my future as well. They rode for hours until they entered a valley ringed by towering red cliffs. 3 wooden posts stood in the center. Elias was pulled from his horse and led to the first post. His arms were raised above his head and secured to an iron ring. His boots barely touched the ground. The first test, Taza announced, endurance. The sun will measure your body. You will not move. You will not speak. You will not fall. 400 pairs of eyes fixed on Elias. The sun became an instrument of torture, beating down with relentless intensity. His arms began to burn within minutes. Time became meaningless, measured only in waves of pain. Sweat poured down his face. His legs trembled. The world narrowed to a pinpoint of existence that was only pain and the desperate refusal to surrender to it. Darkness crept in at the edges of his vision. But somewhere deeper than physical need, Elias found a reserve of stubbornness. He had survived when others had not. He would not fail because his body hurt. Somewhere in the watching crowd, Nizhoni's future hung on his ability to withstand what the sun demanded. When Taza finally cut the bindings, Elias collapsed into waiting arms. His arms hung useless, his legs unable to bear weight. But he was conscious. He had not fallen. The first test was passed. Elias lay in the dirt, every muscle screaming protest. Through his blurred vision, he watched Taza approach carrying a clay vessel. Water. The chieftain held the vessel high, then tilted it forward and poured its contents onto the ground. The water hit the thirsty earth and disappeared. Elias watched salvation vanish, his body crying out for moisture. Then Taza produced a second vessel, larger, fuller, and placed it within arm's reach. The silence deepened, became absolute. Elias's hand moved toward the vessel, then he stopped. Something in the stillness penetrated the fog of his suffering. This was a trap. He forced his eyes to focus on the faces surrounding him. Warriors who had ridden through the desert for hours. Warriors who had stood in full sun throughout his ordeal. They were thirsty too. The realization crashed over him. The test was not about enduring thirst. It was about whether he would think only of himself when given the opportunity to think of others. With effort that cost him more than the hours hanging from the post, Elias pushed the vessel away. His voice came out as a cracked rasp. Give it to them. They have earned it more than I have. Water should go to those who serve something larger than themselves. Taza's eyes narrowed slightly. He picked up the vessel and carried it to the warriors. The water moved around the circle, each man taking only what was needed, until it returned to Taza. Now you may drink, Taza said. A man who puts others before himself is a man who understands the second law of the desert. But the trial was not finished. Taza retrieved something from his saddle, a knife of extraordinary craftsmanship, obsidian blade with intricately beaded leather handle. Turquoise and shell adorned the pommel. This blade belonged to my wife, Nizhoni's mother, Taza said. It was in the wagon yesterday when you placed your hands on our property, the most valuable thing present, worth more than the wagon itself. The revelation hit Elias like a physical blow. He had been working blind, inches away from something sacred. Taza fixed him with penetrating eyes. The third test asks you to speak truth about a man you were yesterday. If you had known this knife was in the wagon, would you have finished repairing the wheel and left it untouched? Or would you have taken it and ridden away? Elias met Taza's gaze directly. I cannot claim to be a better man yesterday than I was. The man who rode past that wagon saw a problem he could solve and solved it because it was in his nature to fix broken things. But I cannot swear that if I had seen the knife, that man would have been strong enough to resist temptation. I do not know who I was yesterday with certainty because yesterday I was never tested in that way. He paused. But I know who I am today. I know what these tests have cost me and taught me. And I can tell you with absolute truth that the man sitting before you now would help your daughter again, even if that knife lay in plain sight. I would finish the repair, I would refuse the theft, and I would accept the consequences because some things cannot be taken without destroying the man who takes them. I cannot speak for yesterday with certainty, but I can speak for today with my life as collateral. The silence was absolute. Elias had not claimed moral high ground. He had offered something more valuable, acknowledgement that the trial itself had transformed him. Taza's face shifted subtly. The trial is complete. This man has proven his body can endure. His mind thinks of others, and his heart knows the difference between the man he was and the man he chooses to become. This is wisdom. This is worth. Elias Cain, your life is returned to you, and you are given a new name. From this day, you are called Dakea, which means he who helps. The warriors lowered their bows. Nijoni walked to where Elias sat and extended her hand. You have saved more than your own life today. You have given me back my voice in the council, and my right to choose my own path. For that I owe you a debt that mere thanks cannot repay. Something had shifted between them during the trial, something that went beyond gratitude or debt. The connection was fragile, dangerous, complicated by everything that divided their worlds, but it was undeniably real. The journey back took place in gentler evening light. Elias rode unbowed, positioned beside Nijoni as something closer to an equal than a prisoner. Warriors offered him water without being asked, acknowledgement through eye contact where before there had been only cold assessment. When Nijoni finally spoke, her voice carried a different quality. You surprised him. My father expected you to fail. When you pushed away the water, something shifted. He had to recalculate who you were and what your presence might mean. I did not push the water away to impress anyone, Elias said. I pushed it away because taking it would have made me less than I needed to be. The trial showed me that surviving is not the same as living with honor. She searched his face. That is why you passed. The trial measures truth. My father recognized that. I recognized it, and now you carry a name among our people that will open doors closed to most outsiders. When they reached his cabin, warriors made camp in a loose perimeter. Nijoni passed Elias a bowl of stew. Your body is in debt from the trial. If you do not feed it properly, recovery will take weeks instead of days. Between bites, she explained the components. My mother taught me. She believed a leader needed to know how to keep people alive as well as lead them in battle. The blade your father showed me, Elias began carefully. I did not know it was there. I want you to understand that. Nijoni nodded. I believe you. The knife was both a real question and a symbolic one. My father needed to know that you understood our possessions carry meaning beyond material value. That blade is valuable because my mother's hands shaped it, because her spirit is woven into it. I see you, Elias said quietly. Perhaps not fully yet, because I do not know all your customs, but I see you as someone fighting for the right to choose her own path, just as I have been fighting to survive on mine. That makes us not so different. She held his gaze for a long moment, and something unspoken passed between them. Then she gestured to the warriors. They see it too, the bond forming between us. Some will approve because you have proven your worth. Others will be concerned because you are still an outsider, and I am still the chieftain's daughter. As evening deepened, warriors told stories around the fire. When one finished a tale about a bear, Nijoni translated, the story resonated with Elias. The idea that honesty could create obligation even across divides spoke to something he was only beginning to understand about these people. As night grew late, Nijoni rose and gestured for Elias to follow. They walked to the edge where stars blazed overhead. She pointed to constellations. That one is called the Scattered Ones. They were once a family who loved each other so deeply they could not bear separation. The Great Spirit placed them in the sky where they would never be apart. But the cost was that they could never touch. They exist in eternal closeness and eternal separation. Elias felt the weight of the metaphor. He and Nijoni were forming a bond that already felt stronger than gratitude. But they existed in separate worlds, divided by histories no single act could erase. I do not know what comes next, Nijoni said quietly. My father has accepted you, given you a name. But that does not make you Apache, and it does not make me someone who can freely choose to build a life that bridges two worlds. I know, Elias said, but I also know that I do not want to return to the isolation I knew before. Something has changed in me. You changed it. And I cannot pretend that I do not want to know what might grow from this connection. She turned to face him. Then we proceed carefully. We honor the bond while acknowledging all the obstacles. We take each day as it comes, and we build trust slowly. It was the most they could promise, a commitment to possibility rather than certainty. But as they stood under the stars, the distance between them felt less insurmountable. They had looked into each other's souls and found something worth defending. The tranquility shattered 3 hours before dawn. Elias woke to urgent Apache and warriors rising with practiced efficiency. Nijoni appeared beside him. Raiders, Comancheros, perhaps 30 men, heavily armed, moving toward the cabin. They likely saw our fires. The name sent a chill through Elias. Comancheros were frontier predators who traded in stolen goods and human captives, known for particular brutality toward Apache. Taza reorganized his warriors into an offensive formation. Elias found himself positioned near the cabin with Nijoni and the youngest warriors. I can fight, Elias said. You are still weak from the trial, Nijoni replied firmly. You will stay here with me, and if the line breaks, you will help me escape. The Comancheros approached with chaotic noise. Their leader, a scarred man with one eye, surveyed the Apache formation. We saw your fires and thought perhaps you were travelers who might welcome trade. But I see you are prepared for war. Taza's response was weighted with authority. This land belongs to the Chiricahua. You are trespassing. Turn around and leave while you still can. The Comanchero leader laughed. Perhaps we can reach an arrangement. You have something that interests us, the woman. Hand her over peacefully, and we ride away. Taza's voice carried cold resolve. You have insulted my daughter and threatened my warriors. There will be no arrangement. Turn around now or face the consequences. The Comanchero leader's face darkened. Last chance. Give us the woman, or we take her after we kill enough of you. Taza gave a sharp whistle. Apache warriors moved simultaneously, arrows flying with precision. 3 Comancheros fell in the first exchange. The battle devolved into chaos, Comancheros charging forward while Apache warriors maintained spacing that kept them out of rifle range. But numbers mattered. Despite losses, the Comancheros pushed forward desperately. The formation compressed. Nijoni grabbed Elias's arm. They are going to breach the line. When they do, we run for the horses. But Elias saw the Comanchero leader flanked by 5 men, angling toward their position. They had identified their objective, Nijoni herself. Without conscious thought, Elias moved. He stepped in front of Nijoni and raised his hands in surrender. The Comanchero leader pulled his horse to a halt. I am not Apache, Elias called out. I am a trapper. These warriors captured me. You want the woman? I will trade information for my life. I know which one is the chieftain's daughter. Let me live and I will help you. The lie tasted like poison, but deception was his only weapon. Behind him he heard Nizhoni's sharp intake of breath. The Comanchero leader grinned. A turncoat. But how do I know you are telling the truth? Because I want to live, Elias said desperately. The woman behind me is wearing turquoise worth a fortune. She is the chieftain's daughter, but you need to do it now before more warriors arrive. There are scouts coming from the main camp. You have maybe 10 minutes. The lie about reinforcements was inspired improvisation. The leader's eye flicked toward the horizon, calculating odds. In that moment, Elias lunged backward toward Nizhoni, his hand closing around her wrist. Run, he hissed, then shoved her toward the gap where horses waited. Warriors closed ranks behind her. Elias collapsed to his knees as his body refused to hold him longer. The Comanchero leader's face twisted with rage. He raised his rifle at Elias's head, but before he could fire, an arrow sprouted from his shoulder, then another. Taza had recognized what Elias was doing and provided covering fire. The Comancheros, bloodied and confused, finally broke. They fled, abandoning their dead. Apache warriors focused on securing the wounded and confirming Nizhoni had escaped safely. Taza approached. You lied to protect my daughter. You made those men believe you would betray us to buy seconds for her escape. This was either the action of a man with true heart, or the cleverest deception I have ever witnessed. Elias looked up. I did what needed to be done. The trial taught me that surviving is not the same as living with honor. She needed time to run. I gave it to her. Taza extended his hand, a gesture acknowledging equality. You have proven the truth of your name twice in 2 days. Dakea, he who helps, even when helping costs him everything. When Nizhoni returned an hour later, she walked directly to Elias. Her face was a storm of emotions. She removed the turquoise necklace from her throat and placed it over his head. This belonged to my mother, she said quietly. It has been worn by the women of my family for 4 generations. By giving it to you, I acknowledge a debt that cannot be repaid with words. You saved my life and my honor. There is a word in our language for the bond that forms between people who save each other's lives. Yagonai. It means one who carries my heart in their keeping. That is what you have become to me. The weight of the necklace felt heavier than stone. Around them, warriors stopped to witness the gesture. The bridge between worlds was no longer theoretical. It was being built in real time, and there was no longer any question about where it might lead. The Comancheros' retreat proved temporary. Scouts returned with news that the raiders had regrouped with reinforcements, perhaps 50 additional men. The new formation approaching was nearly double the size, better armed and organized. Taza called a council. The debate was heated. Retreat to their main camp where numbers favored them, or make a stand here. Nizhoni listened, then spoke with precision. Elias could not understand the Apache, but her tone was clear. Strategic assessment demanding consideration. When the council broke, Nizhoni came to Elias. I have convinced my father to try something unusual. The Comancheros are coming with overwhelming numbers. If we fight head-on, many warriors will die, but we can use their greed against them. The plan requires someone they do not identify as Apache, someone who can approach them and deliver information that redirects their attack. You want me to pretend again that I am a turncoat, Elias said. Yes, but deeper this time. You must convince them you have information about a vulnerability that will allow them to take me without fighting. You will lead them to a position where we can ambush them from above. The plan was audacious and terrifying. If the Comancheros suspected deception, Elias would be killed instantly. Why me? Because you have already established yourself as someone who might betray us, Nizhoni said bluntly. They remember you. They will believe an outsider would take the first opportunity to escape by helping their enemies. Looking into her eyes, Elias knew he would accept. Tell me the plan. The strategy involved a narrow canyon 2 miles east. 60-foot walls on both sides. If the Comancheros entered believing they were flanking the Apache position, Taza's warriors could fire down on them with devastating effectiveness. Elias was given a worn horse and sent toward the enemy under a white flag. His heart hammered as he approached 80 men bristling with weapons. The new leader was younger, harder, with calculating eyes. A French accent suggested complicated history. "You are either very brave or very stupid," the leader said. "The man you tricked died from his wounds. Give me one reason not to let his friends have you." "Because I have information worth more than revenge," Elias said, keeping his posture submissive. "The Apache are preparing to withdraw. They are planning to kill me because I tried to help you. I escaped. I know which route they are taking. I know where the chieftain's daughter will be. If you move quickly, you can intercept them where your numbers will overwhelm them." The French-accented leader studied Elias carefully. "And why should I believe anything you say?" "Because I can prove what I know," Elias said, pulling out beaded fabric Nijoni had given him. "This came from the daughter's vest. I can tell you they are planning to retreat through the eastern canyon because it is the fastest route. But if you enter from the northern end and push south, you will catch them in the narrows where your rifles will cut them down." The fabric was authentic, the story crafted to appeal to greed and tactical vanity. The leader examined the beadwork. "If you are lying, your death will be creative. But if you are telling truth, there might be something in this for you. Lead us to this canyon." The ride took 30 minutes. When the canyon entrance came into view, the leader studied it suspiciously. "This is a choke point. If there is anyone positioned above, we will be trapped." "It is true," Elias said. "The Apache are moving through from the southern end. We need to enter from here. The element of surprise is our advantage." The leader considered, then made his decision. "Forward." The column began moving into the canyon, riders funneling into narrow space. Elias positioned himself near the rear. For 50 yards, nothing happened. Then, when more than half the formation was committed, Taza gave the signal. Arrows came from both walls simultaneously, a rain of death falling with devastating precision. Men cried out, horses screamed, the formation dissolving into chaos. The warriors above fired methodically, picking targets. The Comancheros' rifles were useless against enemies 60 feet above in protected positions. Elias urged his horse toward the entrance. Even as he fled, he heard the sounds of slaughter behind him. The few raiders who escaped joined him in panicked retreat, their numbers cut by more than half. The survivors scattered across the scrubland, their cohesion destroyed permanently. Nijoni found Elias sitting his exhausted horse, staring at the killing ground. She waited, understanding that sometimes aftermath required silence. "You did what was necessary," she said quietly. "Those men came to kill us and take what was not theirs. Your deception gave us the advantage we needed." "I led them to their deaths," Elias said hollowly. "They trusted you because you played to their greed," Nijoni corrected gently. "Your lie did not create their fate. Their choices created it. That is not murder, that is survival by the rules they established." Taza approached. "The first time a man uses his mind as a weapon is hardest. You feel responsible for deaths that would have happened anyway. But know this, the warriors you saved outnumber the men who died. Wives still have husbands, children still have fathers. My daughter still has freedom. These things have value." The chieftain placed a hand on Elias's shoulder. "You are Dakea, he who helps. And today you have proven that helping sometimes means making choices. Others are grateful they did not have to make. That is leadership. Welcome to that burden. It never gets lighter, but you learn to carry it with honor." Something fundamental had shifted in Elias. The man who had stopped to help a woman fix a wagon wheel no longer existed. In his place was someone who understood that isolation was not protection, that connection demanded courage, and that bridges between worlds were built through countless small decisions to help rather than harm. 7 months passed, measured not in days, but in accumulated changes. Elias's cabin had become a meeting place, neutral ground, where Apache and friendly traders could share food and conversation. The cabin had grown, an addition extending the original structure, creating space for guests and supplies that moved between Apache camps and scattered settlements. Nijoni visited frequently, sometimes with her father, sometimes alone. She was teaching him Apache, patient with his clumsy pronunciation. He was teaching her to read and write English more fluently, skills that could mean survival for her people in a changing world. On a winter morning, bright with sun, Nijoni sat working on beadwork while Elias repaired a saddle. The comfortable silence between them spoke of time spent together. Finally, she said, "My father is considering something unusual. The tribal council has been debating formal alliances with outsiders who have proven trustworthy. You have become the example they reference." Elias looked up. "What kind of formal alliance?" "The kind that acknowledges you as part of the tribe without requiring you to stop being who you are. You would have standing to speak in certain councils, to trade officially, to be protected by tribal law, but it would come with obligations. You would be expected to contribute when the tribe faces threats, to honor our customs." The offer was significant. "And what does your father really think?" Nijoni's expression softened. "He thinks you are dangerous because you represent a future he is not certain he wants. You prove that bridges can exist, which means he can no longer argue that isolation is the only path, but it also gives him hope that his grandchildren might live in a world where they can walk in both directions." The mention of grandchildren hung between them. The connection had deepened over months, growing into something that looked increasingly like love. "I would accept," Elias said quietly. "This place, these people, have given me purpose beyond survival. I would be honored to be officially part of something that has already claimed the best parts of who I have become." Nijoni's eyes held moisture. "Then I will tell my father to proceed. The ceremony would happen at the spring gathering, 3 months from now." As the sun descended, Nijoni prepared to leave. At her horse's side, she turned to face him. "There is something I need you to understand. If you accept this alliance, it will change what is possible between us. My father has indicated he would not oppose a marriage if you prove your commitment. We would not be simply two people choosing each other. We would be the embodiment of the bridge between worlds, watched and judged. The pressure would be immense, but the alternative, continuing as we are, connected but never fully joined, feels increasingly impossible to me." Elias felt his heart accelerate. Marriage to a chieftain's daughter was not simply personal. It was political, creating opportunities and dangers. Yet looking into Nijoni's eyes, he knew his answer. "I understand what you are offering and what it would cost," he said quietly, taking her hand. "And I understand that I stopped being the man who could walk away from you somewhere between fixing that wheel and surviving your father's trial. If the path forward requires proving myself again and again, requires building a life that will be scrutinized every day, then that is the path I choose, because I would rather face 1,000 difficulties with you than face one more day alone." Nijoni's control broke, tears spilling as she smiled. She stepped forward and embraced him. They stood together as the desert sunset painted the world in impossible colors. When she mounted her horse, she looked down at him. 3 months. 3 months to prepare for the ceremonies. And then, if all goes as I hope, we begin building the future that neither of our peoples has seen before, but both desperately need. Perhaps a marriage that embodies both worlds is exactly the kind of heresy that will save us all. She rode into gathering darkness. Elias stood watching, his hand touching the turquoise necklace. 7 months ago, he had been a man seeking refuge in isolation. Tonight, he stood embedded in complex webs of relationship, facing a future that promised difficulty, but offered something he had not expected to find: purpose, connection, love, home. The stars emerged overhead, the scattered ones, existing in eternal closeness and separation. But Elias and Nijoni had discovered something different, that with courage and commitment, the distance itself could be transformed, the space between worlds becoming not a barrier, but a place where new possibilities could be born. The desert sang its ancient song, unchanged by human dramas but containing them all, witness to a story still being written. The winds carried whispers of the past and promises of the future, and somewhere in that meeting of memory and hope, a bridge was being built stone by stone, word by word, choice by choice, strong enough to bear the weight of two worlds learning to walk together. The fire crackled in the hearth, casting shadows on walls that had once enclosed only solitude, but now sheltered something far more valuable. The knowledge that no man is truly alone when he chooses to reach out and help, when he accepts help in return, and when he discovers that the greatest adventure is not surviving alone, but learning to live connected, vulnerable, and whole. I hope you enjoyed this Western tale. If it resonated with you, please let us know in the comments which part of the journey touched your heart the most. And for more stories that explore the courage it takes to bridge different worlds, don't forget to subscribe to our channel. Thanks for joining us on this adventure across the Arizona territory.